Welcome and thanks for tuning in for another episode of the Lead to Win podcast, a podcast focused on exploring strategies, mindsets, and stories behind successful leadership and personal development. On today's episode, I have the privilege of visiting with Atlas Aultman. Atlas has helped proven leaders focus on who they are, who their teams are, and who their mission serves by providing master courses, books, and keynotes designed to produce faster successes, retain talent, and attract high-value teammates. Atlas's military career established him as a highly decorated senior-ranking military leader. He was awarded 2 Bronze Star medals from leading teams in various combat zones located in Iraq and Afghanistan. As a technology leader, he was recognized as an international top 40 under 40 from the Armed Forces Communications and Electronics Association after being named White House Junior Officer of the Year. His official military record holds an additional 21 Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps medals. Atlas's TED Talk in South Lake Tahoe exposes exactly how elite leaders make huge decisions quickly and continue to win. His books have been featured on Fox, NBC, ABC, Google, and other major news outlets. Atlas has 5 international best-selling books, and his most recent book became #1 in personal transformation, memoirs, and motivation categories. Excited for this conversation today, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm your host, Bo Bergen. Let's do it. Atlas, welcome, and thanks for coming on today.
Hey, Bo. How are you, man? It's good to see you.
Doing well. You doing all right?
Yeah, man. I know like some of your listeners, I listen to your podcast in my ear when I'm running. So I know some of your listeners can't see that we're face to face, but it's always cool to see somebody after you listen to them and you're like, yeah, it's exactly like I'd imagine. You're a stand-up dude. That's exactly what I imagine. I appreciate what you do, brother. This is a great show. Thank you.
We're just rocking and rolling, man. I'm doing this as a little side project and hopefully helping people out along the way. I know I'm getting better from it. So looking forward to our talk today. First question, what have you been up to lately? What is there anything new on the horizon for you? What you been working on?
Yeah, I've been working on a book. So I do Monday Minutes is what they're called, but they start on about Wednesday, and I start putting research together from a leadership topic, and then I'll take like viral content that's kind of funny because I like to laugh, and I'll mix it together, and I'll do like a Monday 90 seconds, usually a spot where I'll introduce the topic and then give some people something to laugh at. And I just did one on honor this past week, and it was amazing to see the results of that. People just, it opens a lot of questions whenever you start doing that kind of stuff. But I've been working on the book, and the book is coming from these Monday minutes that I've been putting together. So the book is it's Who's First. I was going to go with Start With Who, but I don't like Simon Sinek, so I'm going to go totally different. It's on a patch. I don't know if you know anything about American history pirates, but I'm wearing a Captain Blackbeard hat for your listeners who can't see. And Captain Blackbeard was something that inspires toxic leadership, and the fact that he just didn't care about his crew, and he didn't care about anything really. And he was very scary. He used to light the cannons off of his ship with his beard, and he had a no quarters policy, meaning he's not going to take you prisoner. He's going to kill you. So I took Captain Blackbeard's flag from the 70s. It's actually, I think, a movie created the flag. So and I put a red beard on it, and I'm starting to take the toxicity out of it and make sure people are refocusing back on people. So that's my whole book is focusing people back on people, because that's the only thing you can lead. You can't lead a why, you can't lead a what, a where, whenever. It's all on people. So I've been working on that, man. It's been fun, but it's a lot of work writing a book, man. It's a whole lot of writing. It's a whole lot of work to write a book.
I bet it is. That's a cool concept. I'm interested to see how that turns out for sure. Mention a little bit of your resume and your bio. Well, actually a lot of it, but give us a little background on kind of the backstory of how you've got to where you are right now.
Yeah, man. Like I get blasted on reviews from people who read my last book. It was number one in 12 categories, and most of the comments that are bad ones. There's like 4 comments that are bad. They write like, the book was great. He talked a lot about himself. Like, from my history, I'm an adopted kid, man. I grew up in an adopted Army family. I got brought in and bolted on to another family. And I was always really, really keen on being in the military. And I chased that dream hard. And then when I got in the military, I wanted to do like what my grandpa, who I met, I met my grandpa. I wanted to do what he did before he got out of the military and kind of became a nomadic type of biker. And he was big in the special forces, and I really wanted to do something really unique. So I chased that, and I did that throughout my career, and it put me in a lot of war zones, a lot of conflict, a lot of places where people don't want to go. But I was dreaming about that. My mom, I talk about it in a lot of stages. My mom was she was an advocate for that. I mean, she was really the only person in my life that was blood, and my whole environment was just a bunch of people who were treating me like family because they had to, instead of I don't know what other weird family things. Everyone has weird family things, man. So I'm not trying to like bend an ear and be like, woe is me. I had a great childhood, and I was an adopted kid, and that whole thing, I never grew up, man. I keep chasing dreams. So the military career, I have a ton of accolades that were bestowed upon me because I was around awesome teams. So it's hard to pick like which ones I want to tell people about, because it all faces out on other people. Like all the Bronze Stars were like teams I was assigned to in war zones. And yeah, I got an award for that, but that was a team effort. That was a whole lot of people that brought in a whole lot of wins so that someone could be like, hey, who are we recognizing? And I just happened to be the leader. And I hate that. But the military does that. And the military is big on selfish promotion needs to go out the door. So, whenever someone gets recognized, the first thing you do is you tell everybody that you want to recognize that got you to that spot. Thank you. And it's hard to do that whenever you have so many things that you're thankful for.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyways, the whole book, the whole accolades thing, it's a stem of like what this adopted kid wanted to do when he grew up. He wanted to be in the military. He wanted to write a bunch of notes down for his kids, which I did. And then I put them in a book, and now I'm writing another book. And I just keep doing that and sharing my story. Like what I've really found very interesting is people limit themselves, man. And like, I just never did that. I got asked on a previous show, well, they said, if you could say anything about your childhood, if you could sum up your childhood in one word, what would it be? And I was like, man, that's pretty deep, but I cheated. I said hyphenated word, bolt on. and when I started to really peer into that later, I realized a bolt-on is something that you can decide what kind of bolt-on you want to have. Like if it's a vehicle, you can have a bolt-on supercharger, turbo, whatever. That's a bolt-on. That's an addition that does something in a performance realm. Or you can go get, a glittery license plate cover, which is also a bolt-on. And a lot of people choose to be that glitter license plate cover instead of the supercharger because it's just easier to just be there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something I was born with, man. I guess I've always worked hard for whatever I got. So I hope that sums up a lot of your question. I answered like 5 things in one question, Bones.
No, you're good. I think it gives listeners a little background on where your insight comes from. And I think that's good to start out with, because you do have a lot of, from the stuff I've listened to from you, you have a unique perspective and a unique insight to a lot of things that are very relevant, obviously, or we wouldn't be talking about it. So speaking of insight, I want to get your insight on a couple of different topics today. First one is, and this has kind of been a theme over the last couple episodes that I've had, but we make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. Failure is a part of life. Failure is a part of leadership. I want to focus on some common mistakes that leaders make. So what are some of those common mistakes that you've seen leaders make, and what are kind of the underlying reasons behind those errors that they make.
Yeah, I think Emerson says it best. Whenever someone's talking, listen intently with the intent to listen instead of trying to figure out what you're going to say to whatever's being said. I think the best communicators become the best leaders. And I'll name some, and this is probably going to be contentious to some people because everyone's got an opinion on who they like as a leader, and that's great. But I think Jordan Peterson does it the best, where he listens to exactly what's being said to understand, not to respond, but to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's the best example we have today of someone who actually listens. And Emerson said, if you don't listen, you're not going to ever get anywhere. And I think that's the number one problem I see with leaders today. People don't want to listen. They want to tell you what their problems are and then ask that you solve them somehow without even thinking about what's being said and what their people are telling them the solutions are and what the environment is saying. Because if you listen really closely to a problem, you're not only going to get the people, you're going to get the perspective. And that's just amazing whenever it starts to fold together into a solution.
Mm-hmm.
And leaders, they miss that a lot. They miss that a whole lot. So that's probably the biggest one. I think the second and runner up is people fake it. They fake it a whole lot. So people want to be perceived as having control. So they take on the persona of someone who's not them, who they believe is a good leader. And that comes across fake, and people immediately shut them out because people may not be good at spotting a liar or being deceived. I think over time we've proven that you're going to get deceived and you're going to get lied to. But where people often fail to realize is when they get that leadership position, they got to stop being that fake person that's trying to impress everyone else because it's leadership and not likership. And a lot of people try to be liked and it comes across fake, and then people just use them and nothing gets done.
Yep.
And you know what, dude, I'm guilty of that. I think we all are, where I was trying something new and then I realized it failed. And that process, we all go through it, man. Everyone fails, just like you said. And when you're failing and you realize it, you got to realize it's just part of the process and not take it personal. Don't try to find something else that's fake to try to get into. Just go on with whatever it is that you do. I think that's the second one. So I gave you more than one.
I think that's a very relevant, that second one you mentioned. And like you said, I mean, we're all guilty of it at some point. We all want to be liked. And in turn, that comes off as disingenuine. You're not authentic. You're trying to be a cookie cutter version of the leader that you think you need to be. And rather than, people latch on more to just your natural personality, your natural perspectives on things. And there's a reason that you're in that position in the first place. That's what I have to tell myself all the time. Like, I'm not a expert on anything. I joke all the time. I'm a jack of all trades, but a master of none. But I think people kind of relate to that more. The first thing we need to do is say, hey, I don't know everything. Let's work through this together. It's my butt that's on the line, but if you work through it together and be authentic about what you're trying to do, people latch onto that and they follow that. So how can leaders kind of recognize their mistakes? Because we don't recognize all of them. We do things that we think are right, but it turns out it wasn't. And, how can we recognize that? And then what steps can we take to learn from that and increase our effectiveness as a leader?
Yeah, mistakes are prevalent. Yeah, you're always going to feel it when it's a mistake. You usually feel that as it's playing out. So the biggest mistake is not making a decision. A lot of leaders are not making decisions right now in fear that they're going to get in trouble somehow, and then they find themselves in trouble because they did not make the decision. And failures and mistakes, I like this. I like how we're bringing the show into that. Failures and mistakes, they're going to happen all the time. And whenever it starts to play out and you start to see it going down into that train wreck, you usually see it or you feel it. If you feel it, if you feel something, say something. You got to ask your we call them wingmen in the Air Force, your battle buddy if you're in the Army, but you got to ask that partner that you have, that champion. It's going to tell you the truth. Hey, is this going right? And then if they're real and they're not fake, if they're not trying to be on your good side, if you have somebody like that can be real with you, they're going to tell you too, and that confirmation is going to happen relatively quick. And what happens whenever you start to think something's going to fail is you can adjust while in flight. We like to call it building the plane while it's flying, right? But there's a difference between building the plane while it's flying and putting lipstick on the pig, right? If you're building a plane and it's starting to lose altitude, you feel that, and that's the internal gut check. And you can ask somebody like a navigator if it's a plane, right? Or if you're a farmer and you see an ugly pig and you put lipstick on it, it doesn't make the pig less ugly. It's an ugly pig with lipstick. And what I see at those two comparisons is the flights never take off. People are afraid to make the decision and get in the air, right? And what's really funny is when they make the decision and get in the air, they have a lot more ability to adjust where you're going to go and a lot more feel ability on the decision that was just made than being a farmer on the ground, putting lipstick on a pig, waiting for, farmer Joe next door to come buy the pig. It's a night and day scenario. And that's why I like to use those two examples. Those are commonalities, but most people are farming instead of flying. And they can't get that feeling that I just talked about. So summation, you got to make that decision. You got to get in the air, and then you're going to feel it once you make the decision. Is this going the right way? Get somebody who's with you on that journey to confirm whatever it is that you're feeling. And if it's still going, if it's good, then let it go. Sometimes you're going to get this doesn't feel right. And someone's going to be like, it's good. Just let it go. See what happens. Because if it's going to fail, it's better to fail fast and move forward than wait and see multiple fails crash whatever it is that you got going on.
Yep. That's good. So, when we talked about realizing a mistake and kind of feeling that mistake, what role does self-reflection, say we're talking after the fact, we've made a decision, we're in flight, didn't go as planned. Now it's time to step back and really reflect on, why that happened, what we need to do different, things like that. What role does that play in learning from mistakes, and how often should a leader self-reflect?
Self-reflection. Yeah, it's huge. Every day. So I self-reflect in a calendar. It's an old money habit that someone taught me 20 years ago. When I was starting to see like wealthy people for the first time, I was like, wow, these people have it together. Not really, but they have habits that are fantastic. And one of the things that I saw that's an old money habit that has been pushed around in different formats is doing a nightly review. So the way I put it in my book is reprogramming your subconscious so that you can feel things before they start to really materialize into something that's really bad. So in the morning, I look at the calendar that I did the night before, and I set my day up the night before so that when I move through my calendar and things start to go weird, I get that initial confirmation on my calendar. All right, things are off. And usually it goes with time because of fires, right? People always talk about firefighting when they go to work and like, I'm putting out all these fires. If you're putting out a lot of fires, something's going wrong. And the best way to find out that something's going wrong is when you look at your calendar and it's 11 o'clock and you have a meeting and you are still talking about a 9 o'clock issue. When it's 11 o'clock and it's, 11 o'clock issue and it's 4 o'clock and you still haven't moved past it, you have an issue. And that's when you can start asking people at the end of the day, hey, I don't think this is going right. What do you think? And they'll either confirm it or they'll say, we just ran into some roadblocks that we can remove. And that whole thing happens on a calendar, but it's your calendar. And that's the difference that I think a lot of people don't see. They see someone else's calendar and they try to put themselves into that. If you have a boss, cool. Put whatever it is that's important to you from your boss's perspective in your calendar. When I was working for the President of the United States, we used to live off of the calendar. His calendar would go out the night before, and it would have everything we're going to do. And if we were off by just a minute, things didn't happen. And so I started looking at that, and I paired it with the old money habits that I told you about. And I'm like, if I start looking at it at night, just like they do in the president's staff, and then filter through the day, I can figure out where I need to go the next day and continue the cycle. Where the subconscious comes in on this is whenever you write things down, whenever you take it out of your head and you make it real by writing it down, your subconscious clicks in. Tony Robbins likes to call it the reticulator activating system, where he tells you, look around the room and you find different colors. You've probably seen that. Your listeners have probably seen that.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. If you buy a new car, you're going to see more of that car on the road. If you buy a new pair of shoes, you're going to see those shoes. The way you can program yourself to be more successful is by taking whatever's important to you and putting it on your calendar, but writing it down. And what happens is your brain starts to look for things that make that successful without you even having to think about it because you've written it down. So all of that equates to the feeling that I've been talking about throughout your whole show. Like whenever you start to see that and you feel it on your calendar, yeah, that's the confirmation that I always get. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah, there's two things that I just pulled from what you just said. One is preparation. Too often we get into a mode of tackling things on the spot. I know I'm guilty of it. I'll show up at 7:30 at work and start looking at my calendar, and it's like, probably should have done this a couple days ago or at least last night. So preparation is a huge thing that I heard you mention, and also time management. I assume you learned a ton of that working in the White House or for the White House. And, like you said, the boss of all bosses has a strict schedule. And if you're off by a minute, talk about that time management piece a little bit. What have you learned through your experiences? And if you have any tips or tricks, I'd love to know about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the President of the United States, I worked for the Obama administration. So I was in there for the last part of his first administration. And then I started traveling with him as he transitioned into his second term and living at the White House. And what I noticed was, and I still do this, what I noticed was he put his personal time into his calendar. So every morning we would work out. He put it in his calendar. So if you don't make the time, you're not going to spend the time correctly. Someone's going to spend it for you. It's your time. And if you all look at the calendar, everyone has the same day. Everyone has the same minutes. It's how they actually burn that time that determines the outcome at the end of the day. So if it's important to you, then do it. So, all right. So I'm a speaker. I hit up 3 stages every day. 3. And that's it. I always do 3 stages. I do them at the evening hour after dinner. So I start looking for stages that I want to be on. And then I'll hit up the event organizer, or I'll do the call for speakers, or I'll hit up my speakers bureau and be like, hey, I'd like to go over here. Can you see if they're, but I hit 3 every day. Okay. I do 3 chapters every day. So I'm reading 3 chapters of something every day. If you're not reading, you're missing out, man. That's reading is just something people don't do anymore, but it's like, I put a whole lot of failures in my podcast. I'll tell you about, getting hit in the face in Indonesia. I'll tell you about squirting one in front of a seal whenever I got, pummeled one time. It's just, I'll tell you a whole bunch of failures. People write that stuff knowing that people aren't going to read it. And when you read about someone's failure, you don't have to learn the hard way. That's what my mom used to say. You can learn it. There's 3 different ways you can learn. You can read, you can watch, or sometimes you're just gonna have to pee on that electric fence and figure it out. That's the hard way. I don't want to pee on any electric fences around here. So the reading part, but the things that are important to me, I build that into my schedule. So it's on point every time. LinkedIn has a program for experts. So I have leadership and leadership development. I've been a top voice for leadership on LinkedIn. And what it does is it makes you go through a series of questions and answers. You answer the questions. So I dedicated some of my time for a couple months doing that, and that built me into somebody else. So whatever it is that you're going after, you have to put it in your daily calendar. And if you miss it, guess what? You have to account for that. Like you are your own boss. Here's one that's huge, Bo. Whenever you're told to show up at 8:00 on Monday morning by your boss, you show up at 8:00 on Monday morning. And you look at your boss different than you look at yourself. Because whenever the alarm clock goes off and it's time to get up, a lot of people hit that snooze button, man. And you are your own boss there. And you're telling yourself in that moment, you're not as important as some other dude who's temporary in your life, or another boss this other girl boss that's temporary in your life. These people who are temporary shouldn't be as important as you are, because you're the permanent presence in your life. And you need to figure that out, man. And the best way to do it, like I said, calendars. I think it's calendars. Time management 101. Put what's important to you on your calendar. If family's important, which it is to me, I have five parts of my day are family right now. So I'm very blessed and fortunate for that.
Yep. It's good stuff. So there's a few misconceptions about leadership, and we talked a little bit about the authenticity piece, and people are trying to fit themselves into somebody else's leadership style or leadership persona.
Yeah.
What are some common misconceptions about leadership in general that can lead to mistakes, and how can leaders kind of guide their organization to not make those mistakes, overcome those misconceptions about leadership?
Yeah, misconceptions about leadership. So most people think that leadership and management are the same thing. So that's a common misconception. People often interchange those words, and it makes me mad. I had a boss of mine tell me that I should have led something better, that it was clearly a management task. And I was like, that's not leadership, that's management. Whatever. So here's the history on that. Henry Ford came up with an assembly line, and he started looking around the world to figure out how he could make this work with leaders. And he realized that leaders have the ability to think about what's going to happen and influence the future. And in an assembly line, you don't have to really think about what's going on. You just have to do your part of the assembly line. So he created this assembly line of managers, and he paid managers more money than the people who are making it everything by hand. The common phrase that I've heard out, or the common figure that I've heard out there, is 30 cents an hour. And he took those people, and instead of paying them 30 cents, he said, I'll pay you $3 an hour to manage. Basically do the same task over and over and over again. And we've taken that mantra, and hundreds of years, we've employed it, and we've called it leadership. The person who's at the end of the line, who's managing the product, whatever that is, does a quality control, and they call that person a leader. They give them a title, and they'll say quality control leader or whatever. They give them a title, and then immediately these people think that they're leading something when they're actually managing it. They're managing something very important, still important, but they can't change the way that product was made. They can't change the way the people on the assembly line are doing things. There's a process in place, and there's management for that. Leadership looks at that, true leadership, and figures out, how can we be more innovative? How can we improve the system? How can we do things with stronger quality in mind, but for maybe less money and less time? And that leadership element comes in and provides vision, which is something that is needed. And unfortunately, what happens with management is people think that their vision is today instead of where they need to be in the future. So the common misconception, I'll answer your question that way, is that leadership and management are the same thing, and they're not. There's a clear historical boundary, and there's a reason why they're two different words. and people try to become managers whenever they are assigned a leadership role. If you're in charge of a division, if you're in charge of people, then you should be looking at how you can lead instead of manage. Don't be trying to get by every day whenever you can figure out how to make something better. That's leadership to me.
Yeah, that's good. So, can you share some strategies that you've observed or figured out over the years for creating a just kind of a culture of continuous improvement and learning as well, from mistakes, or just, you always want people to be lifelong learners. That's a cliche statement, but if you're not learning, you're not getting better. But what are some strategies for kind of creating that environment, creating that culture within your organization that can help leaders avoid, repeating those common mistakes over and over again?
I think the biggest one is figure out who's on your team. Whenever you can figure out what people are passionate about, you can figure out how to fuel that passion. I'm big on that. I put it in my book, and it was confirmed through the first series of Undercover Billionaire. The guy's like, hey, a lot of people come onto my team, and then I'll ask them, who they are, and I'll figure out little things that they like to do. And, you shouldn't pigeonhole your players. I'm like, man, I put that in my book. And this billionaire is saying the same thing. And what happens is a lot of people look at the people on their team, and they look at them as very specifically doing a specific task instead of figuring out what they like to do, how they like to learn. That's another one. Like, for 10 years, we had a reading list that was produced by the top person in the Air Force. And he would be like, here are the books that I suggest you read. Cool. A lot of people don't read. So that got pushed into, these are the top TED Talks to watch. And I'm like, wow, that's actually good. And then I started becoming a learner because I'm like, I like these TED Talks, these are cool. And then I'm a visual person. So if I can get the book in a visual format, like if YouTube does a book review, then I'll get the book that way. I like to do, like, that's the way I learn. But until someone asked me, how do you like to learn? And then they took the reading list and they made it something that I like to do, I was lost.
Mm-hmm.
And the innovation cycle, the way to grow people, because you're right, whenever they grow, whenever people aren't doing something to grow, they stagnate and they don't go anywhere, and that hurts the whole team. But whenever I figure out how I can fuel whatever it is that they like to do and make that a learning objective, that's when I started winning. So figure out what people are passionate about, and then figure out how you can move your way of improving everyone on the team into their way of thinking and the things that they like to do. Because it shouldn't be a task to learn something that improves you. It should be something you look forward to doing,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So switching gears here a little bit, another topic I want to talk about a little bit is leadership effectiveness. And, obviously everybody wants to be an effective leader, but, what are some characteristics or some key characteristics of effective leadership in today's world?
Yeah. Communication definitely is the key to making effective leadership happen. People often take what's being said and process it internally, and then start to move out on something that wasn't even asked for. And then they'll be so far off course before they come up for air and ask for a vector check that people don't see them as effective leaders. So back to listening, you have to listen well to be an effective leader. It's a two-way street, but it's more listening than it is talking. You'll find out by being around experts how things should work. And if you can remove roadblocks for that to actually materialize into reality, you're going to go full steam ahead, man. You're going to be freaking trucking through some innovation because people already know how to fix things, and they complain about leadership. And I'll do air quotes on that. Not helping them because those leaders are stuck in their office, unask your chair every once in a while and go figure out what's really going on.
Mm-hmm.
What I used to do in Afghanistan and Iraq too is battlefield rotations. So I would get requests, and this isn't something that I came up with. This is a Pattonism, and I'll talk about that too. Patton, uh, he used to get updates from his generals, and he'd be like, "Man, this is bull, man. This is not how things are working. Let's get in the Jeep, and we're going to go down to the battleground, and we're going to ask the guys that are in the fight what's going on." And then he would go down there and get ground truth. Ground truth. That's where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So he'd get ground truth from the battleground on what was needed. And then we started moving like rocks, like big rocks out of the way. And Patton was known as one of the most effective leaders in military history. I mean, there's movies on that, there's books on him, and there's a reason for it. And it was because he listened. I did the same thing when I was in Afghanistan, and I used his mantra, and I'd go out and talk to the SEALs. I'd go out and talk to the long tabbers. It's special forces guys. They were training folks. I go out and talk to the Rangers. I would talk to the folks that were doing the work, and I would ask them, "What do you need?" And they would tell me because they know what they need, and
Mm-hmm.
that way I would remove all of the middle people who were trying to tell me what they thought that they needed, and I would clarify really quickly on things that actually did get in my coffers as big needs. So listening, communication, man, all day long. But the biggest part of communication is listening. So put those feelers out there and listen, and you'll move faster. You'll move way faster because of it.
So I'm a big assessment guy, and not formal, but just like, that's why I mentioned self-reflection early on.
Yeah.
I always like to just sit back and analyze, how did that conversation go? How did that, what was the outcome of that decision I made? Things like that. But in terms of measuring your effectiveness as a leader, how do I do that? And I'm not talking about, looking at our sales reports and looking at the revenue and the profit. I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about, how do I measure my effectiveness, the more intangible things within my organization? How do I do that?
Intangible. I like that. How do you measure your effectiveness with intangible instead of tangibles? Like, because everyone looks at the bottom line. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Like how much sales, what are the numbers? Numbers don't lie. So your results will vary based off of that. But internally, your internal compass on how you're doing as a leader, it comes down to, how do you see the people that are on your team growing into someone that they should be in the future? And so I look at it this way. I'm going to help you out. I'm either going to help you grow in the job that you're supposed to be doing and make sure that you're extremely effective, or I'm going to help you out of my team to go somewhere else where you need to be. And the biggest example I have of that is I had disruption happen in our organization where we had an outsider come in who was an expert, and I'll say that in air quotes because it might have been an expert in one faction, but they had no idea how our world worked. And that's very common whenever you have someone come in and do work to help the organization get unstuck. So you'll have these consultants come in and you're like, who is this person? They don't even understand how this is going. And they don't know what's going on in our world. They just came in, now they're giving us advice. And I had that. But the part that most people miss is those people will help in specific areas. And most of the time, if it doesn't have anything to do with you, it won't affect you. So why complain about it? So what I had was, I had two people on my team that were interested in maybe helping the consultant. I'll put it that way. So I looked at them as some people that I could see doing that work later. And I pushed them into that realm. And then I filled up the void with what they were doing with other people who wanted to be in their jobs. So eventually, I pushed them into roles that are in very, very high roles in the government. And then the people who were working for me, they all got promotions. They all got the highest promotions they could get because I fast tracked their progress by giving them people who actually wanted to do the work and work for them instead of the people who wanted to work for somewhere else or someone else and then fake being in there and then kind of drag the whole team down. So I help people out. That's the way I like to put it. I'm going to help you out and you're going to get, me 100% to get you to that next step in 3, 5, 10 years. Or you're going to get me to help you make that step outside of my team so that you can be the person you need to be in 5, 10 years. And I don't think people see it that way. I think people are very selfish, especially as leaders. And they look at an all-star player and you're like, I can't lose that person. The hell you can't. The hell you can't. Because the person that comes up behind them really wants that job. Trust me. They really want that opportunity. And whenever you give somebody who's hungry a meal, they eat it. They eat it. So helping out, that's how I would frame that.
Yeah. My mind was going, you probably listen to my podcast a little bit, but I'm in the world of education. And I have a team of coaches, I'm an athletic director, but I have a team of coaches and, you think about losing people, like obviously I've got some great coaches. I've got some pretty good coaches, things like that. But there's certain people that I really don't want to lose. But it inevitably happens because you want to help them do such a good job that other people are looking for them.
That's deep.
And the same thing with assistant coaches. And I compare it to like a business. You got a boss, you got managers, you got people that are working under the managers. If those people are getting promotions, then your effectiveness is pretty good. That's kind of how I see it. So, when I lose people, like last year, I lost an assistant wrestling coach. He got a head wrestling coach job. Great. Yeah. I hate to lose him, but that means that we're doing our job in developing those people to where they can get those positions later on. So that was kind of what was
fantastic for your organization, man.
Absolutely.
If I'm hungry and I know I can do it, I'm coming to you, man. And I'm gonna be like, I know what you just did for someone else, and I know you're about making it better for wrestling, not just for you. It's because like let's face it, man. If you get a great coach on the other side of that mat, and it's your coaching versus them, that's a real fun day. That's a real fun day. I'd rather be challenged that way than be like stacked up and be like, hey, I know how today's going to go. It's just you got to do your thing. We're going to tally the score at the end of the matches, and we're going to win. I mean, I'd rather it be like exciting and be like, yeah,
absolutely.
Like, what are you going to do here?
Competition breeds success. I mean, whether that's within your organization or against another organization, it breeds success, and I've seen it over and over again throughout my career. So that's good. Yeah. So what, in what ways can, say I'm a leader and I really want to empower my team to reach their full potential and contribute to the organization's success? In what ways can I do that? I know we've talked about listening to them and, what are some other ways that we can really help our people reach maybe they never reach their full potential, but that growth mentality, that growth mindset, how can we foster that environment for them?
Yeah, fostering a growth mindset in other people is always hard because you can't make people do what they don't want to do. So growth mindset, I would take it like personal. Take it down to the personal level and make people tell stories about failures and successes. And the way I would make this happen, and the way I've done this for organizations is it's called a 3 up and 3 down. So give me 3 strengths that you think you have as a leader and tell me a story on how those strengths are helping the organization. But that's the easy part. People are quick to talk about themselves in a good light. The next part is tell me how you failed and how you've overcome that. And the stories that you're going to hear can they can morph into stories that you'll tell people who are visiting the organization, maybe potential clients or customers, because they're real. And
Mm-hmm.
people miss the story aspect of leadership. One of the best leaders that I've ever had, every time we'd have like a billionaire or like a huge CEO come in, or senator, or some of the elected officials that we had come through our organization, because we were elite, right? They would always tell stories, and they would have that element of success, failure, success. And the story themselves, the story was captivating, and it told something that got taken out of the room. And leadership is about storytelling, if you really think about it, because you can take your story and someone can see themselves in it enough to where they'll become the future leaders that you're trying to develop anyways. So 3 up, 3 down, writing them down, putting on what it is, and then evaluating yourself. I have a one pager, I'll put it out on my website for your listeners. It's basically, whenever you get something complex and you get the one sheeter, like how to set up a TV, and it's like, it falls out of the box and you're like, oh, there. Most people don't look at themselves as a complex leader. They don't look at themselves as complex, but I have a one pager, and on that one pager, it tells you like the assessments that you probably like for me, I'm an ENFJ. I have, my love languages on there, my enneagrams, and it's basically all these things that I've assessed myself to do. And those things change. So every year I'm looking at them and I'm seeing, okay, have I changed? And then here are my strengths and here are my weaknesses. Like, hey, I'm just not a morning person. Give me an hour or two if I have to come in at 8, I'm going to come in at 8. Yeah, I'll make sure that happens. But between 8 and 9, I'm going to be coffee. I'm going to be thinking about what I need to process. That's usually the time when I start to look at things for my holistic life, and that's my reflection time. I tell people about that. So if you're going to come in at 8 o'clock and give me something hard to do, probably ain't going to happen, man. I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you. On Fridays, everyone's freaking distance anyways, and they're thinking about the weekend or whatever. I'm not going to make any hard decisions on Fridays. Those are weaknesses that I have, right? And so I put that out on the one pager, and it kind of tells you these are my degrees, this is my experience, this is how I think, all the stuff that you should know. People don't do that anymore. So that reflection is something that I think we need. Definitely, we definitely all need to do that.
Yep. So last question in this section here. Trust is a huge thing that I've talked about it with a few of my guests, but I want to get your thoughts on how leaders can build trust and some credibility with their team members, and why that's so important for effective leadership.
Yeah, trust is vital. How do you build trust? Be trustworthy. It starts with you. If you say you're going to do something for your team, better do it. If it's money or resources, or you're trying to get them a facility, it doesn't matter what it is. You better do it. And if you can't, you better tell them why and what the expectation is. Because the more they trust you, the better everything will go. They'll trust you with bigger problems. And the only reason why they bring you problems is because they trust that you can come up with a solution. So whenever someone brings you a problem, don't push it away and be like, hey, why are you bringing this to me? That's not how effective trust works. So do what you're supposed to do. Starts inside your head. If you're waking up in the morning again, wake up in the morning. If you're going to be setting a meeting for whatever time, be there early. All the things that go along with trust are basic to your core of integrity and doing the right thing on time. Once you build it internally, people will follow, and they'll understand that some of the things that they may do at home are not acceptable on the team. So The biggest example I can come up with that people do at home is they'll say they're gonna do something around the house and then they don't. The honey-do lists is what used to be called. You say I'm gonna get to that, and then you just don't. Don't tell people you're gonna do stuff if you're not gonna do it, and that starts internally. But your family, man, your family's important. So if you're not doing stuff for your family, you ain't gonna do it for anyone else. And all that stuff, it equates to a habit that you'll form. So you need to do that. Second parts of that is accountability. Your team, if they say that they're going to do something and they don't do it, what's happening with that? How are you holding them accountable? Are you asking them questions? A lot of times it's asking questions. If you want to leave your mark on an organization, do it with a question mark. Because the people who ask the most questions, that are most curious, those are the people that everyone remembers as changing the organization. Because if you're asking a question and you make people think about what their actions are, their actions then get checked by themselves. So they're doing an internal check just by you asking a question. So that's how you influence other people in a trust manner. And then the last part is deliver. Deliver early if you can. Always overpromise and overdeliver. I know that's messed up a lot. Underpromise and overdeliver, but overpromise and then overdeliver, and you'll get trust every time.
And you'll probably look back and you've achieved more as an organization. If you overpromise and you want to develop some trust and follow through with it, you're probably going to achieve more than you thought. So that's a interesting thought there. In closing, tell me a little bit about your books. I know we mentioned them earlier a little bit, but who's kind of your target audience and who might benefit the most by reading them?
Yeah. So my books were all written for my kids, man. I mean, I wrote a bunch of notes and I wrote them so that they could have the internal dialogue with themselves whenever they get faced with problems in life. Like, okay, whenever this happens, how am I going to get through this? And like I talked about earlier with the bolt-on type of mentality, there's two types of ways you can approach a problem. You can really go inside your head and really beat yourself up, or you can figure out how you're going to move through it. So a lot of the things I talk about in my book are ways that I move through problems. Like the Secret Service was going to arrest me for stealing one of their vehicles. Type of problems. How did I move through that? Well, I put the story together and then I sent it around to see if I can get other leaders to add to it. And it turned into a book that ended up at Harvard Business Review. And then Dave Goggins published a book similar to that based off of his struggles called Can't Hurt Me. And then he was telling everybody, don't let anybody publish your book. And I'm like, hey, Harvard, I'm gonna need my book back. And then I started publishing my own books. But they were really for my kids. And what I found with those books is whenever they started hitting businesses and education and medical industries, people were starting to resonate with the same thing. Leadership's leadership, man. Leadership doesn't matter what industry you're in, nonprofit, it doesn't matter. Like leadership's leadership. One of the best ways I've heard it described is it's like porn. You can't really describe it, but you know it when you see it. It's like, it's leadership. So if I take a little bit of my flavor and I give it to you, man, you can really do something with that spice of life that I put into my book. So I published all those books like that. And I made them quick and easy. So my book at the end of each chapter in my book, I have reviews. And if you want to read my book, you can do it by going to the end of the chapter and hitting the highlight. You can read my book and take away 30 years of knowledge of leading in all these combat zones in the White House. All that stuff I put in. Whenever I saw awesome stuff, I wrote it down. And then I put it in there and I summarized it. So you can read the book in 5 minutes. People don't have time. People don't read. 5 minutes, man. And then if you're interested in like reading the story behind it, I put the story in there, like, getting hit in the face in Indonesia, or, going on these missions that people were telling me just weren't going to be successful, and then they turned out to be. All the stuff that people, would like to pass on to their kids, I wrote that down, and that's my books. The new book that's coming out is going to take a different feel. It's going to be very, very, very short again, because I don't want to take up a lot of time. Everyone's got noisy lives now. So there's a lot of things competing for attention. And I don't want to compete for your attention. I want to give you things that you can use. So I've moved into that space where the 5-minute read, I'm still going to do that. At the end of the chapters, you can read my book in 5 minutes. I want you to be able to take the things that are applicable to life today and use them immediately, so that you can move out and know that some of the things that I write about may not fit into your world right now, but they probably will later. So I'm a big student of leadership, and that's why I wrote the books.
Cool. Yeah, I look forward to checking them out. That's if I can pull something in 5 minutes from, that's a big draw to me, because as you said, we all have noisy lives, and I honestly don't know when I would sit down and just read a book. I maybe that's a character flaw or a time management flaw for me, but man, between the kids and the job, I don't have any time.
I feel you.
But
yeah,
anyway,
that's why I put it in my calendar that 3 chapters. But dude, like, even when I read 3 chapters, I'm not sitting there like the lazy dog did. No, I'm looking at key nuggets. Like, I'm moving through the chapters, and I'm like, oh, let me read this. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. I'm not hitting every word, guaranteed.
Yep. That's how I am. I'm a skimmer. Yeah. Where can my listeners find, maybe I'm listening to this, I'm really interested in what you do. Where can they find you and learn more about the work that you do?
Yeah. So for your listeners, I'll put out the one pager that I talked about, a chapter of my book, and I'll put something else out there on leaders-kit, leaders-kit.com/lead to win. I'll make that website for your guys.
Cool.
To check that out. And then, if they want to reach out to me personally, like they have a stage request or something like that, instead of going through one of my agents, they can hit me on LinkedIn. That's actually me. LinkedIn is the way I communicate with a lot of people nowadays. Very powerful platform. I love it. So that's it. And that's Atlas Aultman on LinkedIn.
Cool. Yeah, we'll link all that in the description too. So be sure to check that out. Okay, last 2 questions here.
Yeah.
Looking back at your career, all the things you've done, what's been the most rewarding part for you?
Yeah. Knowing that you harness the power of the most powerful people in the world inside, based off of your personal dialogue with people. President Obama would do meet and greets every once in a while. One of the ones I like to talk about was one where he walked in and he saw this old man, and the old man was sitting in a chair. And he said, "How you doing, young man?" in his booming presidential voice. And no matter what your politics are, whenever you see a moment like I'm about to describe, man, it warms your heart. So, yeah, immediately this guy looks up, he sees the president of the United States, and his shoulders rock back, and the wrinkles on his face were replaced by this giant smile, as this recognized leader recognized him. And you don't have to be the president of the United States to do that. You don't have to be in any position to lead positive change in your environment. So I started taking on that mantra and greeting people, and I saw the same thing that the president of the United States did. People respond to you when you're positive in a positive manner, and you can really change your life by putting a lot more positivity in there. So I'll give you that.
Question. At the end of the day, what do you want to be remembered by? What do you want people to remember Atlas Aultman by, and what do you want your legacy to be?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of reputation. So my reputation and honor, if you will, resides with if I can give you something to help you, your family, and America really do better, I want to be known as that guy who made a positive impact in a lot of lives. Not holding on to cards that maybe would benefit just me. I put a lot of cards out on the table that will help a lot of people because I want to see everyone win, and I want to be challenged continuously to be better and live in a better world. And I hope that I'm challenging people to be a better version of themselves, and that I keep getting these positive notes of how I change people's lives with some basic things. It all goes back to the basics, man, right? The sprawl or the single leg, it's all basics, man. And whenever you master the basics, kindness, giving back, you'll see your whole life change. And that's what I want to give to people. I want to be remembered as someone who gives that type of experience to people who maybe not experiencing that right now, maybe doubting themselves, maybe in a slump, maybe thinking, why do I have this leadership job right now? You're there because you earned it. So earn it every day. I know you kind of touched on that a little earlier. You're there though. Yeah, so there's a reason why you're there, and it's not because you're a failure. So suck it up, Buttercup. You're going to make wins happen, or they're going to find somebody else to do it.
Reality of it, for sure. Well, Atlas, I appreciate you coming on, man. This was good. Learned a lot of stuff, and I hope my listeners did too. And like you said, hopefully they can take some pieces and apply it to their situations and their lives and become better for it. And I appreciate you and what you do, and look forward to following you the rest of the way.
Thanks, bro. Same.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Lead to Win podcast. If you're listening this week, make sure to drop a rating on whatever app you're listening on. I'd love to hear from listeners and make this podcast even more relevant to you. Also, make sure to follow the Lead to Win podcast on social media. We're on Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Give us a follow and feel free to share the content. Again, thanks for listening this week. I'm your host, Bo Bergen. See you next Tuesday.